me up. Forgive me. I'm trying to do one too many things at a time. Unfortunately, they don't let me do this all beforehand, so I gotta do it this way. Sorry about that. Okay, got sound. So the Crumbleys are the parents, and this was really a case setting precedent, a precedent setting case. Sorry, that's a dyslexia kicking in. The parents were charged with involuntary manslaughter because they bought the gun and gave it to their child at the age of 15, did not maintain security of the weapon or the ammo, etc., etc. And because of all of that, they were found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. I will show you the page here, get this up and going. I'm going to have to do it this way. The gentleman here in the orange is James Crumbley. The lady here in the black and white stripes is Jennifer Crumbley. So at this point in time, we're going to be listening to the witness impact statements, and we're going to also be listening to the verdict. There's been some court case jargon going back and forth. Hold on. I'm live with the James and Jennifer Crumbley high school shooters conviction. Like I said, sometimes I can get everything done. Sometimes it's finicky and I have to wait till I'm live. So the attorneys have been going back and forth with the parole board people, discussing the way they scored them. There's things that they do. They interview them, their drug abuse, alcohol abuse, if there's any previous trial or court cases or convictions, and they rank them and score them, and that helps the judge with the sentencing. So they have discussed that. They took a break. Now we are in for the victim impact statements. Warning, this will be triggering, so I will put this on. Sensitive material. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Right here. Why is it not letting me? I'm going to do enter, and I'm going to do show. There we go. I'm still learning this program. It's a lot to learn. So here we go. And mind you, if this is triggering and you are struggling, it's okay to step away. I fully get it. But I have had multiple people ask me to put this up, and so here we go.
Later, it was a very quick.
The judge has been sick. I believe it was COVID. She said she had something contagious, but the doctor deemed her well. She just has a nagging cough. And Lord knows me understand a nagging cough. Okay?
Sure.
Once again, thank you for joining me. If you're watching, I really appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Subscriptions are very important to me. I'm really hoping to get to 1,000 subscriptions by the end of July, so please hit the subscribe button. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Ooh, come on, camera person.
I would like to start with the person that matters the most. Madison, she was a kind soul. She always had a smile on her face. She lit up the room when she walked in. Her laugh I could listen to all day. It was infectious. Her big sister skills were undeniable, and she took that role very seriously. Madison was smart, funny, loving, passionate, determined, and genuine. Her expectations were high, and at times we needed to let her fall. She needed to be reminded that not everything is perfect, even if she wanted it to be. Madison had an influence that most never achieved. Sometimes I would listen to a poem she wrote or watch her create art with no tracing, just pure talent. She would talk about college and what majors she would like to do and what would be most helpful to society. The passion that she had for everything and everyone was remarkable. I would catch myself watching her and thinking to myself, how lucky am I? I'm the one that gets to be her mom. What did I do to deserve a perfect person? She will be the best thing to ever happen to me at such a young age myself. I grew up because of her. We grew together. I learned from her. I mattered because of her. From the moment she was born, I promised myself that I would be there no matter what. Through the falls, heartbreak, letdowns, and struggles, I would be there. I would listen, learn, and love every moment. I wouldn't miss a thing. I would always protect her. On November 30th, 2021, exactly 17 years, 6 months, and 13 days made me break my first promise, and it will hurt for eternity. As her mom, I didn't protect her.
Oh, it's not your fault, honey.
First, I'd like to say thank you to the prosecution team. I say thank you to you all. Saying thank you really doesn't seem enough anymore. The countless hours you've worked, the time away from your family, and always taking our feelings into consideration. Karen and Mark, the work you've put into getting all the facts, speaking to us like we matter, and never wavering from your goal. It speaks volumes of the people you are, and I'm proud to call you a part of Madison's voice. Advocates and Jen, I'm not sure where to start. You've all seen me hit points in this tragedy that some days I wasn't sure who it was. One minute I'm laughing, next I'm crying, sometimes I'm just silent. Either way, one thing stayed consistent. You always listened. Jen, you're not just a friend, you are family. My mind keeps going back to something during the trials. Something that is almost on repeat like a broken record. It's something as a mother I can't understand, and honestly, I don't think any mother would understand. It was when Jennifer said it wouldn't do anything different.
Oh,
I'm putting a little emphasis on different, as I know life throws us things that are out of our control. But life takes turns and eventually puts them back in our control. Like giving you a hint when something needs to change. I want to compare a few things to see from my perspective. As I know things are different about the events and how we see them from the events on November 30th. While your son was hearing voices and asking for help, I was helping Madison pick out her senior classes.
oh my gosh.
While you were purchasing a gun for your son and leaving it unlocked, I was helping her finish her college essays. While you dropped him off at school, upset that he was failing class, I texted Madison, drive safe, it's slick outside, have a good day. When you got a call to me at the school about your son and how it interfered with your day, I was rearranging my schedule so I could take Madison to get her oil changed for the first time.
Oh,
When you left without hesitation and not taking him home, I was worried if she'd be okay driving in the first snowfall of the season and if she brought a coat. When you walked out of the office with a steady pace after hearing an active shooter, I ran from my home and started driving, trying not to break the law. When you were on the phone for 10 minutes with each other trying to figure out where the gun was, I was on the phone with her father and family trying to figure out where she was.
oh my gosh, poor baby.
When you left the Myers without knowing where your son was, I was desperately trying to get there as soon as possible. When you knew the gun was missing, you called the police, knowing it was your son who took it. I was having family call every hospital describing what she looked like. When you texted, Ethan, don't do it. I was texting Madison, I love you, please call Mom. When we found out about the lives your son took that day, I was still waiting for my daughter in the parking lot. When you questioned the reason on why you would do this, I was questioning if I was doing enough to find her.
When you got a chance to speak with your son, seeing him alive and showing no support, I was watching families reunite with their children waiting for my moment. When you asked him why, I was waiting for the answer as to why the last bus never came. When the police showed up at your house, you didn't understand why they were there. And I was asking police if they checked every possible location and if I could go search too. When you texted about not losing your job and you needed a lawyer, I was still calling my daughter because she came first in all parts of my life. When you could leave your house, I was still a prisoner in Myers. When you worried about what people thought of you and feeling threatened, I was learning your son threatened my daughter and fatally shot her in the head. When you drove to get your burner phones for communication, I was laying on the floor in Myers for hours crying because I forgot how to speak. When you checked into your first hotel, I was telling Madison's 11-year-old sister she was gone. When you cared more about yourself and getting alcohol and supplies, I was identifying my daughter in a medical office wishing I could take her place.
Oh my gosh.
While you were hiding, I was planning her funeral. And while you were running away from your son and your responsibilities, I was forced to do the worst possible thing a parent could do. I was forced to say goodbye to my Madison. We all see things different. Some prioritize and some don't. Accountability can only be given if you actually try it in the first place. As a parent, we all make mistakes. This is a normal way of life. Usually when mistakes happen, we learn from them. We try to fix it or talk it over. But continuing to make the same mistake over and over again is no longer a mistake, it's a choice. That becomes a decision. Those decisions that you made ultimately took my daughter's life. Because you decided that you didn't want to parent and listen to your son. You took the right away for me to be a mother. You do not get to decide that. You do not get those privileges. You are not above anyone. I love being a mom. It's the one thing that I'm truly great at. You care more about your well-being than the one life that you should put above anyone, your child. And because of that, you both took 4 beautiful children away from this world. Being a parent is the part of life that you should hold to the highest level. It's an honor to be a mother or a father. Even when you think you've done your best, you continue to do more. Unfortunately, you never made it to level 1. You say you wouldn't do anything different. Well, that really says on what type of parents you are, because there's a lot of things I would do different. But the one thing I would have wanted to be different was to take that bullet that day, so she could continue to live the life she deserved. We show no remorse, no respect, or compassion for our family. The same traits that you bestowed upon your son. The traits that have torn my family into pieces. The lack of compassion that you have shown is outright disgusting. Not only did your son kill my daughter, but you both did as well. The words involuntary should not be a part of your offense. Everything you did that day, months prior, and days after were voluntary acts of your son to commit a murder. Not just one, but multiple. Shaking your head during a verdict is the utmost disrespectful thing I have ever witnessed. At that moment, you felt your life was more valuable than my daughter's.
Yep.
I will say that will never be true. You decided that parenting wasn't a priority. Putting your child first should be the only priority. You did it, and because of that, I've lost my daughter. I had to get answers after her death. Watching the video, hearing testimony on how your son executed my daughter. Watching
she
him
saw
put the
that
gun to
video,
her
y'all.
head as she covered her head and pulled the trigger. Seeing pictures of her laying in her own pool of blood, knowing her body sat there for hours, that rigor mortis had already started to set in. So that when I identified her, her body was in a state I couldn't imagine. Hearing her sister scream over and over again night after night, watching her family and her friends fall apart. You created all of this. You created your son's life, which then allowed this to be his path, which should be yours as well. You don't get to look away. You don't get to cry. I didn't get that choice. You failed as parents.
Yep.
The punishment that you face will never be enough. It will never bring her back. It will never be a loss that you have suffered, and it will never heal the pain. Because one day you're going to be able to see your son, visit, hear his voice, possibly laugh, maybe see him grow. I will never see that again. The so-called loss that you say you have suffered doesn't even compare to the loss of a child.
True.
Your Honor, I request that the maximum sentence be enforced, as it will never come close to the life sentence I was given. A life sentence that I didn't ask for, but a choice that was made for me. A life that I will suffer because of their negligence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, honey, I wish I could reach through that screen and just hug you. This has been such a difficult trial and series. And it's hard to hold the emotions. But I'm so proud of them. So proud of them.
Yes.
I hope this brings
Thank
some
you,
sort of
Honorable
closure.
Judge Cheryl Matthews, for your time on this case. I know it hasn't been easy on both. Thank you also to Karen McDonald and the entire prosecution team. We appreciate your efforts. Your Honor, my trauma and devastation is hard to put to words, but I have done so in my letter to you. I would also like to mention Justin's brothers, Nathan and Clay. They are now forced to live a life without their beloved middle brother, Justin. My son Justin was the least deserving of his fate. He was the best son that any mother could pray for. Justin was brave, spending his final moments protecting a fellow student. He was hardworking, a lettered athlete, a top honor student. He was kind and inclusive to all. He was full of love and joy. His future was so very bright and full of possibilities. His passing has touched so many family members, friends, students, and the community in general. The ripple effects of both James and Jennifer's failures to act have devastated us all. This tragedy was completely preventable.
Yep.
If only they had done something, Your Honor, anything, to shift the course of events on November 30th, then our four angels would be here today, and Justin would be getting ready to celebrate his 20th birthday on the 18th of this month.
Aww.
If only, Your Honor, they had taken their son to get counseling instead of buying him a gun. If only they had secured that gun. If only they had spoken up that day in the counseling office. If only they had checked his backpack. If only they had taken him home.
If only.
Or taking him to counseling. Instead of abandoning him at that school, I wouldn't be standing here today. Your Honor, I don't know what's in their hearts, I'm not a mind reader, but I only know the facts of this case. And the facts of this case, both cases, have been deeply disturbing. What I would like to share with the shooter's parents is an example of what love looks like between a mother and her son. This is what Justin wrote to me on one of the last birthdays that we celebrated together. Dear Mom, words cannot describe how thankful I am for you. You have been nothing but an amazing mother for as long as I can remember. Thank you for being a role model. Thank you for showing me what it's like to never give up. You inspire me to do better each and every day. I love you so much. Love, Justin.
Oh,
It is devastating and heartbreaking that it doesn't appear that either of you cherished or even wanted your son. But I wholeheartedly wanted and cherished mine. You have failed your son and you have failed us all. This failure had deadly consequences that can never be undone, that can never be made right. I am asking, Your Honor, for the maximum sentence allowed. Thank you.
one thing you guys didn't get to see because this is way too long is that the Crumbleys, Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley, through their attorneys, have fought to have the right to communicate either through letter or video calls with their son. And the judge is going to go ahead and grant that because she didn't see anything legally preventing it. Honestly, I'd argue against it. We lost our child, you just lost yours.
Justin's dad. So Honorable Judge Matthews, for the second time in 6 months, I find myself standing in front of a packed courtroom, a victim. This time, I'm here to address a different judge and the parents of the deeply disturbed teenager that murdered my son. This is my opportunity to try to describe just how much the horrific event that took place back on November 30th, 2021 has impacted my life. It's my belief that an impact statement should not just describe how this particular event impacted me. I feel that it should also be impactful towards all who hear it. And in your case, Judge, I hope these words impact you in a way that influence your decisions here today. As I look around at all the lawyers, police officers, media folks, and other victims, I can't help but ask myself, what could I possibly say that this whole scenario doesn't already say? This is messed up. Most people will never have to make a victim impact statement for the rest of their lives.
True.
And the fact that the victims speaking here today are doing so for the second time in 6 months should speak volumes in and of itself.
Yes.
This is not normal. Living a life like this is not normal. So how does it affect a normal guy? To be completely honest with you, it remains a rather difficult and uncomfortable question to answer. In my previous impact statement, I've expressed many of my day-to-day struggles, from uncontrolled emotional outbreaks to sleepless nights to not being able to focus on a normal daily. Yeah, it's fair to say that I live every day with pain, anger, heartache, regret, anxiety, stress, you name it. They are all there, wreaking havoc in my once normal life. They say that time heals all wounds. Well, we're coming up on 2.5 years now, and I can assure you that the wounds are still as fresh as they were on that tragic day. And with this hole that has been left in my life still glaringly obvious, I fight every day to not lose more of myself within that very hole. I've spent the last 30 years of my life busting my butt to support a family, raise children, and try to set myself up for some peace and quiet in the golden years of life. But the unthinkable has happened. And that peace and quiet I worked so hard for may never come to be. At least not to the degree that I've always imagined it. Literally every single aspect of my life has been affected by this tragedy. And I could spend a long time describing in detail just how it has impacted me. But it seems like it would be way easier for me to just tell you how this tragedy had impacted me. Because there's simply nothing on that list. Now that the verdict is out on this monumental case, I feel strongly that it has caught the attention of most parents across the country. The overwhelming facts in this case were all that was necessary to prove that James and Jennifer Crumbley not only neglected their son by failing to get the necessary mental care that was clearly needed, but provided them the very tools necessary to carry out those heinous acts of violence. It was these very facts that allowed not just one, but two full juries to find both of them guilty of involuntary manslaughter. I will always maintain the opinion that the facts that were presented in these cases were strong enough to convince any jury of their
I can't control the glitching. I
I
apologize.
maintain throughout the course of the past couple of years, being the parent of a murdered child, tending to cause you to seek out maximum penalties allowed for each guilty verdict derived from any of the criminal charges. I think the stance is completely justified, and it would be so for any parent in this position, in the same position as mine. However, this is a court of law where a person is innocent until proven guilty, and the defendant has the right to dispute the fact of the charges against them. That being said, during the course of both of these trials, I did my best to capture every word and process all the facts. This is important because there is value in these facts, not just in the thousands and thousands of man-hours invested in gathering, processing, and organizing the evidence, but also for being able to use that evidence to establish the cold, hard truth of this tragic situation. That James and Jennifer Crumbley failed in their parental responsibilities as they pertain to the shooter, who was their son. The cold truth that shows that they did nothing to address the obvious signs of the deteriorating mental state of mind currently present within their son. And of course, the very hard truth that shows that they provided their son with exactly what he wanted to use to do what he did, and failed miserably to secure it properly. One would probably think that in order for something like this, or something of this magnitude to even happen at all, there would have to be a ton of things that went wrong. Although there were some things that definitely went wrong that day, for several of those things, I believe that if they had been handled correctly, we wouldn't be here right now. And James and Jennifer Crumbley carried the bulk of the responsibility to handle those things. During their trials, the overall similarities between the two were evident, and I believe this is why they were both convicted. Numerous facts that were the same for both trials show clearly that the parents failed their son, and ultimately the entire community. With Jennifer, the thing that resonates most is that she stated that even knowing what she knew now, she still wouldn't have changed a thing.
That was a nail in her coffin.
When she said that 4 precious lives were lost at the hands of her son, by means that she helped provide. She saw the drawing of murder, drawn at the hands of her son. She sat and heard the request of the counselor and did nothing. And she still says that she wouldn't have changed a thing. I just don't understand how someone can be that heartless to make a statement like that. The blood of our children is on your hands too. This is one reason why I feel that Jennifer should receive the maximum amount for her sentence. The fact is that it should be all the other things she needs. With her distinct lack of remorse and overall mental understanding of the tragedy, I feel that the maximum amount of time available is needed for her to be able to fully comprehend the gravity of her actions and the lack thereof. With James, there were a couple of things that jumped out at me in particular, but one thing that was tough to digest is the fact that when the verdict was being read, he sat there and shook his head in total disagreement. As if this suggests that the jury was wrong and that there were no grounds for a guilty verdict. I was dumbfounded to see him shake his head with such disbelief. And actually, that almost suggests that he truly believes he did nothing wrong. How could you possibly think that? 4 precious lives lost at the hands of your son by means that he helped provide. He saw the drawing of the murder, drawn with the hands of the son. He sat and heard the request of the counselor and did nothing. I just don't understand how someone can so arrogantly dwell on a pool of self-pity without being able to say one thing to justify themselves. The blood of our children is on your hands too. This is but one reason why I feel James should receive the maximum amount of for his sentence. The fact presented should be all the others that he needs. With this distinct lack of remorse and overall unethical understanding of the tragedy, I feel that the maximum amount of time available is needed for him to be able to fully comprehend the gravity of his actions and the lack thereof. Throughout the course of all of this, and I'm talking from way back in the beginning, I just can't get over the fact that this tragedy was completely avoidable. There were three obvious signs that were completely overlooked, and the bulk of the responsibilities to address those signs lied on the parents, and they failed. Across the board, failed. They willfully ignored the cries of their child and selfishly put themselves before helping him. This type of blatant disregard is undeniably unacceptable. It is a large reason why the events of that day were able or were allowed to happen, and another reason why I feel they both need the maximum amount of time available to be able to fully comprehend the gravity of their actions and the lack thereof. We all know that having children is a big responsibility. Although extremely rewarding, it starts out pretty scary. I mean, let's face it, they don't exactly come with instructions. There's no mute button, and unfortunately, no pause or rewind buttons either. Oh yeah. And there are times in the beginning that they really snap. Yet we still have them. We still want that responsibility, even though it's not very clear what it all entails. But how can we accept that responsibility and not act responsibly towards that child? It doesn't add up. A child, even if she is an oozy child, deserves the same amount of love, compassion, and care that every other child gets. A child deserves someone who is confident enough to lead by example. Because let's face it, it wasn't that child's choice to come into this world. We made them, and it's your responsibility to teach them how to live. It's your responsibility to set a good example. It's plain and simple, just like that, ladies and gentlemen. And the sooner we can figure that out, the better we all will be. Being a parent is hard work, but if it's done correctly, it can be the most rewarding work you ever do. There's no one that can tell you how to do it, because each child is so precious and unique. I mean, there's no other one like them in the entire world, and that's why. So cherish your one and onlys, and never give them up. Never give up on them, The result of doing so can be catastrophic, and can affect the lives of so many other people. So I ask you all to go home today and hug your kids, and make sure they know you are there for them, and make sure that they are all right. It's so crucial for the whole of our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shulman.
Good job. I know that was difficult. Well, these are the parents of the 4 children. We've got one more, I think, left as far as parent, maybe. I don't know. And then they're going to hand down sentencing. Thank you for joining me. If you're just joining me live, these are the family members of the 4 high school students that were shot by a young man named...
Our 10-year-old little brother had to learn how to write a eulogy for his sister before he even learned how to write essays.
Oh gosh, this is
November
the
30th,
sister.
2021, all our parents did was send us off to school. Yet the next time they see Hannah is to recognize her lifeless body in a medical examiner's office. And I met with Hannah and a friend during school that day. When we split
He was
ways to go back to
11 years
class,
old at
I
the
just
time.
looked back and smiled. I didn't say goodbye. I never got to say goodbye. I never got to remind her that I love her, that she's my everything, the person I want to walk through life with side by side. I thought our future was a given. Of course, she'd play her first high school basketball game that night, get ready for all the other school dances, have her JV and varsity season for all the sports she played, get her driver's license, play her lacrosse season, have her first date, prom, graduation. She never got a chance for any of that. She didn't even get her 15th, 16th, 17th, or 18th birthday. These are only some of the high school experiences she never got to have, but it is absolutely nothing compared to the rest of everything she had going for her future. That list is eternal.
Sorry for the glitchies.
12:51 p.m., November 30th, 2021, that was the moment I became aware of the fragility of our mortality. Hannah was healthy. Hannah was only 14, shot 4 times. 12.5% of the bullets shot that day were at her. She took her last breath in her own pool of blood in a school she hadn't even been in for 3 months. Alone for 7 minutes while police passed by her, bleeding out as a security guard failed to put a tourniquet on her, dying as EMS took more than 10 minutes after the shooter had been detained to even give aid to her. Our Japanese grandma would often worry about anything bad happening to us because she knew how dangerous it is here compared to Japan. She told me on FaceTime that Hannah would respond with a laugh, saying, "Don't worry, I'm a fast runner, I'll outrun them." It wasn't possible for Hannah to outrun the bullets spot by you, Jennifer Crumbley, which were fired by the 9mm sig sauer that you, James, gifted to your son. Both used to murder Hannah, Justin, Tate, and Madison. The fact is, no matter what you try to make yourself believe, Jennifer, you did fail as a parent, both of you. To love and to be loved, that is the human experience. It was up to you guys to show your son that. Instead of giving quality time and compassion, you give your son a gun you knew caused extraordinary damage.
At the age of
Because
15.
you didn't use the other 2 firearms or the .22 ammunition you own. I believe your actions cannot even be confined to the word failure. Your mistakes created an everlasting nightmare. So yes, you are still a danger to society, because even after serving 2 years, you have yet to admit to your wrongdoings. And we know that when we do not learn from our mistakes, we repeat history. You call yourself a victim. The difference between you and Hannah, Justin, Tate, and Madison, you and my family, you and all the students there that day, is that we didn't have a hand in the cause of this. You caused the most cruel thing I could ever imagine. You guys made loving Hannah so painful. That is not a narrative, that is reality. For that, unless you have a time machine or the ability to stop time, there is no existing punishment or rehabilitation that will ever be enough. Because there is no way that the one life I now have to live without Hannah, my little sister, my best friend, my other half. To me, that makes the maximum sentence being 15 years too short. Hannah didn't even have 15 years to live. Jennifer, you stated that even after knowing everything you know now, you wouldn't do anything different. I cannot fathom that. I would do anything to hear her footsteps coming up the stairs. You don't have to roll your eyes, it's on video that she said that. To not have an empty seat at the dining table, to have her come into my room and ask which clothes to order, to see her napping on the couch, to laugh and share a look when we accidentally say the same thing at the same time. There's not a day that goes by that I wish I had around that building. If I knew what I know now, I would do everything differently in a heartbeat. I hope time makes you think differently. One day, I hope you would have chosen to care for your son, teach him how to love and to be loved, that you would not choose to buy the bullets that enter children's bodies, that you would not choose to omit relevant important information to the counselor Sean Hopkins and Dean of Students Nicholas Ejak that could have helped their incompetent brains and one shared brain cell to decide to act and search the backpack, that you wouldn't still choose to hide from accountability when you're the reason we had to hide for our lives, that you would choose to save Hannah, Justin, Tate, and Madison. Like my mother said, both of you should implore that even on your worst days, it's the tomorrow Hannah doesn't get. The tomorrow she wanted to live so badly, the tomorrow that she should have. I can never do Hannah justice when talking about her. She's all I want to talk about, and yet I would need a lifetime and still wouldn't have the right words to capture incandescence, humor and thoughtfulness, kindness, or loyalty. She's always there for you, helping without a second thought. She's always sharing, whether it's her smile, her food, her clothes, her crafts, her joy. She's funny. It's a given. She brings people together. Whether it's her contagious laughter or sarcastic wit, you will be laughing right along with her. She's noticing the small things, new shoes, new haircut, cute jewelry, but even more importantly, she makes you feel seen. She's extremely spirited. Her energy is unmatched on or off the court. She dresses up every holiday, every Spirit Day, the first one to put up Christmas lights, or any lights for that matter, not even realizing she was a light for so many others. She's the one who would not only playfully roll her eyes and smile when I would say I'm taller than her as I look up to her. Not only did I look up to her physically, because yes, she was taller, but as a whole, as a human being. She isn't perfect, but she's Hannah, and to me, that's as close as you can get. I can't convey what losing Hannah has done to me. I miss her with every breath I take. I think going forward without her is something I'll never be able to fully navigate. I believe the word sad is inappropriate to use because it does nothing to capture the hurt or the way my soul shattered. I didn't know. I've never felt every atom of my body igniting from anger until Hannah was murdered. I didn't know what it was like to want to stop waking up in the morning until she wasn't here. I've never known pain that is forever until seeing Hannah in a casket. I didn't know it was possible to feel so isolated even when you're surrounded by people. I didn't know how it feels to not know yourself at all. I have no idea who I am without Hannah. She's my happy, she's my home. I look for Hannah in everyone I meet, every place I go, and it's exhausting when I'm met with disappointment every time. But it's the world, it's all the people she would have met. I grieve for them too. To have that chance of Hannah being in your life taken away from you is a tragedy in and of itself. She's more of a person than you two combined times a trillion could ever even hope to be. But when the day comes that you re-enter society in 13 years, I hope you live more like Hannah. I hope you live every moment to the fullest like Hannah. I hope you laugh every day like Hannah. And I hope you love unconditionally like Hannah. That's it.
Thank you, Lee. Mr. St. Julian.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm back. This is the second time they've had to do this. They first did it with the shooter's sentencing.
But an odd state of mind today. Rather emotionally blank right now.
Kind of gaining this up as much as I can.
Part of that is having to do this again.
Yeah.
Part of that is I'm mostly a private person. And the idea of having to pour my heart out again is irritating. And I can't match the eloquent words that have come before me in previous impact statements.
You don't need to, boo-boo. You don't need
So I'll
to.
limit my words today. The defendants, through their choices, through their indifference and gross negligence, enabled their son to murder my daughter Hannah and 3 other children. They chose to stay quiet. They chose to ignore the warning signs.
Yep.
And now, as we've heard through all of the objections, they continue to choose to blame everyone but themselves.
Yep.
Every single objection I think that the council said this morning put the blame somewhere else, their son, not them. I stood before the court 7 months ago and spoke about the impact that Hannah's murder had on myself and my family. Nothing has changed since then. It's impossible for me to truly convey the complete impact of my daughter's loss.
You never will.
Hannah's murder has destroyed a large portion of my very soul. I've said these words before. It's still the truth. I remain a shell of the person that I used to be. I think of her and miss her constantly. Every day is a battle to attempt to move forward, struggle to get out of bed, to go through the motions of everyday life. Simple everyday sights and actions bring pain, as I think what should have been like with Hannah there with us. I think of all the good times that we've shared together as a family, and more on all the memories that will never be. I will never think back fondly on her high school and college graduations. I will never walk her down the aisle as she begins the journey of starting her own family. I am forever denied the chance to hold her or her future children in my arms. A few words describing Hannah can in no way fully capture her truly beautiful, caring soul, or impart her unlimited potential. Hannah was an absolutely beautiful and thoughtful person. She was always the first person to notice when someone had a problem, and the first to go out of her way to offer help. She was incredibly curious and talented. She continually tried new things. She crafted homemade jewelry, tried cooking her own recipes, and played several sports. She was a record holder in track and a leader of her school and basketball teams. She also hoped to join her older sister on the lacrosse team in the spring. She had aspirations of her career dedicated to helping people. All of this is lost because of the defendant's actions and choices. My position regarding the defendant's sentencing and in the future has evolved through their trials. At first, I was focused on the importance of getting a guilty verdict, to have a message conveyed to the public that this type of behavior and choices are not acceptable. I didn't have strong feelings about their sentencing. It was just something that would be determined by the system. My view, however, has changed as the defendant's level of defiance has grown. Instead of acknowledging any mistakes, they continue to show no remorse. They take no accountability. They and their lawyers continue to try to change the narrative and portray the defendants as victims of the prosecution team. They blame everyone but themselves, and they trust as retribution.
No breadcrumbs of sympathy for the
The
family.
jury has found them guilty. Multiple juries have found them guilty. Hannah, Madison, Kate, and Justin are the ones who have lost everything, not the defendants. As such, I ask this court to sentence the defendants to the maximum allowable penalty of 10 to 15 years in prison. Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you. Mr. Muir.
Tate Muir's dad. First of all, Mark, Karen, the whole team, strong work. Everybody said you couldn't do it, and you did it. For our family, it's not time to celebrate. This tragedy has taken an incredible toll on our family. So our family's not going to give the Crumbley family a second of our time up here. It's time to turn our focus now. This is the low-hanging fruit. Now it's time to turn our focus to Oxford schools who played a role in this tragedy. You know, here this morning we're listening to all the objections, and here Sharon talking about protecting the criminals, civil rights, constitutional rights. Where's my rights being protected? I fight for everybody in this room. My rights aren't being protected. Criminals' rights are more important than our rights, my rights. We are ready for our government to perform an investigation on this tragedy. Many don't know that our government has not investigated this murder. A pre-shooting investigation, a day of the shooting investigation, and a deep dive investigation into a horrible response to this tragedy. The disrespect shown to us families. The simple things, like trauma training for somebody like a Sheriff Bouchard, who we got to talk to on the day that we got to go identify Tate. And he referred to Tate as a girl because he was too busy that night working to cover it up, instead of learning about every kid, Tate, Hannah, Justin, and Madison. It's time for the whole truth to come out. It's time to learn from this, from the purchase of the gun to the response. That's when real change happens. Because when we can look at something and we can evaluate it, apply lessons learned, that's when real change happens. So how does St. Juliana's family ready for the truth? Justin Shelley's family ready to hear the truth? Nicole Baldwin's family ready to hear the truth? Taylor's family's ready to hear the truth. Quit denying us that. It's time to drive real change from this tragedy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That concludes the evening activities. There's no one else. You're not presenting anybody else. Ms. Smith, what would you like to say when we have your time?
Your Honor, my client would also like to investigate. Would you like to have others? Okay.
Of course, you may both have to.
Thank you. I didn't know the meeting.
Either way first. It's up to you. You were your client.
Would you like to go first or would you like me to go first? I can go first. Okay. Do I stay here?
You can stay there.
Your Honor, is there any way she can have this handcuff off? Because she has multiple pages.
Okay, right here, I don't have to shuffle.
You're okay.
I don't know if I'm allowed to.
Okay, it's okay. She said she's okay. Okay.
Go ahead, Ms. Smith.
I sit here today to express my deepest sorrow for the family of Hannah, Tate, Madison, and Justin, and to all those affected on November 30th, 2021. The dragging weight is taken on my heart and soul cannot be expressed in words. Just as I know there is nothing I can say is going to ease the pain and suffering of the victims and their families. There's a quote I heard that rang true. Grief. For those of you who understand, no explanation is needed. And for those of us who do not, no description is possible. I've taken countless nights of lament over the anguish and shame I carry. Knowing what my son did, the harm he caused innocent lives, the families, and the entire Oxford community. I pray all the victims are reminded of God's mercy and peace, and that He heals your broken spirits. When I was on the stand, I was asked if I would have done anything different. I was horrified to learn my answer I would not have was completely misunderstood. That answer is true because my son did seem so normal. I didn't have a reason to do anything different. This was not something I foresaw. That was the intention of my answer and how I interpreted the question. In hindsight, and the information I have now, my answer would be drastically different. If I even thought my son was capable of crimes like these, things would have absolutely been different. Even worse, when I learned during a police investigation that he had been planning a school shooting before November 30th. He was not the son I woke up. He was not the son I knew when I woke up on November 30th. The Ethan I knew was a good, quiet kid. He loved his pets, family vacations. My husband and I used to say we had the perfect kid. I truly believe that. And that's who I saw and thought I knew. As the details started emerging during discovery, I was horrified to learn concerning behaviors my son was reported doing at school. Refused to take a makeup test. He told us he took. Sleeping in class. Drawing pictures of guns on his assignments. Writing, quote, my family made a mistake. Watching a video in class of a mass shooting that fatal day. Along with internal communications that took place between his teacher and counselor, Mr. Hopkins. That he was, quote, on my radar, and, quote, he seems to be having a rough time, was never disclosed to us, his parents. The school claims this was not abnormal behavior because of the pandemic and Oxford being a, quote, gun community. To say I was curious when we learned this information is an understatement. This is not normal behavior to us and very different than what Ethan was believed was happening at school. Not only were we left in the dark about previous concerning behavior, but in the counselor's office that morning, none of those previous issues were brought to our attention. I can't stop thinking, had they been, the conversation that morning would have been much different. That it would have taken a deep dive into what's really been going on with my son. I wonder if Hopkins and EJ have those same regrets too. Instead, we're led to believe, not only from Hopkins and EJ, but from Ethan as well, that this was an isolated event. We felt confident and trusting the professional's advice to let him stay in school that day. Quote, he did not pose a threat to himself or others. It was suggested that him being around here would probably be good. We agreed. We were never asked to take him home that day. If that was discussed as the best course of action, we would have obliged. The prosecution keeps saying we didn't give them the big picture that morning in the counselor's office. But what they fail to acknowledge is the bigger picture the school did not give us. I'm not the same person I was prior to November 30th, 2021. This tragedy has changed who I am, and has taught me some very valuable lessons. It said suffering we gain wisdom. I've also gained God. In the quiet hours of myself, I prayed to Him about the deep impact this tragedy has had on the families, and the endless pain no one should ever have to feel. For as God holds a true understanding of their pain. I've also learned to depend on Him for peace and strength, although I'm not strong enough. I've learned that we cannot tell or predict what will happen to us in this life. One day we wake up and everything can change. We can, however, decide what happens in us, how we take it, what we do with it. And that's what really matters in the end. That's the test of living, is how we take the unimaginable, the tragedies, the raw hardships, and make them a thing of worth and beauty. I've also learned to never think this could not happen to you, and stereotype that bad kids come from bad parents. The prosecution has tried to mold us into the type of parents society wants to believe are so horrible, only a school or mass shooter could be bred from. This is a very difficult assumption to have. We were good parents. We were the average family. We weren't perfect, but we loved our son and each other tremendously. Everything we strive for was to make sure our son had the best life we could give him, to grow up traditions and experiences we had, to be the best person he could be. I know we did our best. the love I have for our son mixed with the regret for not seeing what was ahead weighs heavily on me. My point is, this is being any parent up here in my shoes, even to be your child, to be your grandchild, your niece, your nephew, your brother, your sister. Your child can make a fatal decision, not just with a gun, but a knife, a vehicle, intentionally or unintentionally. If there's anything the general public can take away from this, is that this could happen to you too. The tragedy has taught me the true meaning of unconditional love, as I watch my parents still love and care for me wholeheartedly, no matter what has happened. If there's nothing else I can do right in life, I do still love my son unconditionally, and perhaps that is my purpose. Your Honor, I don't envy the decision you have to make today. I understand this is a novel case, and punishment expectations are high, not just from the prosecution, but from all those affected as well. The heartbreaking journey these families have endured. Hang on, I have to back up. I missed the most important. I need to address. The most valuable piece of wisdom I gained is the power of forgiveness. To forgive the prosecution for the slander and hate against me and my husband. Ms. McDowell, Mr. Keith, I have hated you with deep anger, but hate is too heavy of a cross to carry. I need to be set free of that burden and recognize that you are people just like me, imperfect, but a child of God. I know He wants good things to happen to you, and in any conflict, whatever the circumstances, He is there loving both sides. To the victims and the families. I stand today not to ask for your forgiveness, as I know it may be beyond reach, but to express my sincerest apologies for the pain that has been caused. Your Honor, I don't envy you the decision you have to make today. I understand the punishment expectations are high from all sides. This heartbreaking journey families have endured is more than anyone should have to bear and acknowledge in its full depth. My time in confinement has been filled with deep remorse, regret, and grief over this tragedy. I have taken this one day at a time, trying to survive, navigate, and cope with the endless heartache, pain, and grief I feel for the families of Hannah, Justin, Madison, and Tate. I have also lost myself over my son's wrongdoing. I have been shredded by the public opinion of me, shamed as a horrible parent, pained to be a terrible person. But the worst hell I carry is my own self-judgment, remorse, and deep regret. I've been criticized that I don't show emotion, I'm unsympathetic, I don't cry enough, but alone I grieve. And if you were to look into me internally, you'd find I've died on the inside. I will be in my own internal prison for the rest of my life. Your Honor, I ask you to take consideration that I have been locked in a cell 23 hours a day, essentially in solitary confinement, for over 28 months, and that the court finds a fair and just sentence for me.
Thank you.
Yes, sure, thank you. Your Honor, as I pointed out in my sentencing memo, this was a no-win case. When we walked in the door, there are no winners here. Every single person was something here. And there's also no limit on the amount of sadness, grief, and horrific emotions that are felt across the board in this case. And what Mrs. Crumbley does express remorse. When she expresses sadness, there's a tendency, and there has been a tendency for people to say she's shifting from sadness to the victims and putting it on herself. She's not doing that. There's an abundance of sadness. There's enough sadness to go around for all of the victims, for Mrs. Crumbley, for everyone involved in this case. It's not surprising that the victims have come in and obviously want the maximum sentence. There has been a narrative throughout this case that they believe is true. And this court knows that there is other information that was not a part of this case. And I believe this court knows the defense was hugely hamstrung, and I think the court was pained at times over what to do.
I guess I'm not sure what you mean.
I'm talking about not being able to call the medical professionals, not being able to call the shooter to the stand, not being able to cross-examine on various pieces of evidence.
I'm not convinced the shooter would have helped you.
Okay, well, all of those are obviously issues, but there were things that hamstrung the defense. And I do believe
the forensic.
the forensic records would have helped. And I understand the court has already ruled on that. I understand that. The tendency, though, after hearing the narrative that has been made public, has been to make Jennifer Crumbley sound like a monster, to vilify her, to make her sound like a horrible mother, an evil person. And the truth is, it's an effort to put her in a category of other, to say this is not something that could happen to any of us. And it is. It is something that could happen to any of us. And people fail to realize what the sentencing memo shows the court through numerous letters of support, that Mrs. Crumbley does have a kind heart. She does have compassion. She has spent night after night crying, not for only herself and her son, but also for the victims and for what her son did and what she will live with, knowing he did, and what she missed all the years forward. At the end of the day, we asked the court to look at Mrs. Crumbley's role in the offenses. We asked the court to consider that while she did not oppose having a gun in the home, she was not the person who was responsible for storing the gun and believed it was being stored properly and that it was locked. Mrs. Crumbley obviously testified, and all of the evidence at trial showed she believed there was a string lock, a cable lock placed on the gun, on the weapon.
I don't mean to interrupt you, that has really troubled me. Because you spent a lot of time talking about the fact that she didn't know anything about the gun, she didn't lock it, she wasn't responsible for it. But at one time she was texting her husband to see whether or not he got the gun and how much it was. She posted pictures of it as her son's Christmas present. She shot the gun. And I don't know if you're aware of this, I don't know if either side was aware of this, but the first jury determined that there was solely defendant James Crumbley. And Mrs. Crumbley testified that when she returned from the range of the shooter on November 27, it was the defendant James Crumbley who was responsible for the 6 hour retreat from the car and was told to keep it safe. The first jury recognized that the GPS admitted in the case shows that even prior to the defendant James Crumbley returning to the house, the shooter was videotaping the unlocked 6 hour in the kitchen of the home. So that's not true. That's not true. She also testified that the key to the cable lock was kept in the rear side of the kitchen, but it's clear that the cable lock was fairly narrow open.
Your Honor, first of all, the jury's finding about the timing of the GPS and when the gun video was made is not correct. The evidence at the trial did not support that. We know that's not correct. Mrs. Crumbley left the gun in the car so that James Crumbley could put the gun in the house and store it correctly. Mrs. Crumbley, there were multiple cable locks in that house because there was more than one cable lock. There was not just the cable lock that was on 6 hour. There was more than one.
I didn't recall that.
There were not more than one found, but whatever Ethan Crumbley did with the cable lock from the 6 hour, we don't know.
The gun wasn't locked.
Your Honor, jury, okay, factually, during Mrs. Crumbley's trial, it was not proven that the gun was not locked. I don't know what happened at James Crumbley's trial.
You know about his statements. The gun was never locked.
Whose statements?
Mr. Crumbley's statements.
Mr. Crumbley and Mrs. Crumbley talked about how the gun had been left. In all of the evidence I saw. Well, Your Honor, obviously we have...
Go on. I don't think the evidence has shown that she had no involvement with the gun.
I'm not saying no involvement. I said she supported the gun, she didn't object to the gun, but when it came down to it, probation writes in their narrative that she taught her son how to use the gun, and it's very obvious watching the evidence in the trial that she was not the one teaching him how to use the gun.
There's no evidence that she taught him how to use the gun.
When Mrs. Crumbley spoke, she acknowledged what the testimony was at trial about all of the different things that she wished had come to her attention from the school employees. And the prosecutor's office has said that the proposal the defense has made regarding Mrs. Crumbley is a slap in the face. And what's truly a slap in the face, not only to the victims in this case, but also to the Crumbleys, is how much the Oxford schools did fail the Crumbleys and all the victims. Because if Mrs. Crumbley had been presented any of those 5 things, things would be different and we would probably not be here today. I am asking this court, I know the court of public opinion is running high right now, emotions are running very high. There are many, many complicated issues with this case. It is a dynamic and different case than most cases. Mrs. Crumbley does have a good heart. This is a woman who had no felony history, a working mom who was very busy, did have a hobby.
I don't think there's anything wrong with those things.
I'm just saying, largely the evidence at trial were some of those things, and Mrs. Crumbley did have an enormous amount of love for her son, and what she has been painted out to be in the media and throughout this case, and even throughout the victim impact statements today, is just not congruent with the people who know Mrs. Crumbley and know her heart. It's also not congruent with the text messages she sent right after the shooting about how she wished she would have died instead of one of the kids.
I don't think the verdict was about how feeling she is or how sad she is. I think the verdict was about behaviors that led to today.
Well, there has been an enormous amount of criticism about whether or not she's sad enough, and there was cross-examination extensively about whether she cried or not enough on the stand, or when during the videos that were played of police interviews and things like that. And then, on the same hand, when
I don't doubt that they were both in shock. I don't doubt that.
And at the end of the day, though, when she did cry, there was an objection about crying. And so Mrs. Crumbley from the very beginning has been damned no matter what way she went. This was the most horrific thing that could have happened to the community, to the victims, to these families. Absolutely horrific. At the end of the day, however, it's a unique and complicated case, and that is why I proposed the sentence I did. I don't believe the sentencing guidelines take into account the very unique situation that we have in this case with a young man who will be in prison forever. I'm asking the court to keep that in mind, and please keep in mind the other arguments throughout the memo.
I think you know that I read everything you send me.
I do. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Do you want to respond now, or do you want to hear from this first?
I prefer just to be able to respond once later.
Are you okay with that?
That's fine, Your Honor.
Would you like to address the court, or would you like the client to address the court first?
Would you like to address the court, Jamie?
I would.
Yes, sir. Mr. Crumbley will address the court. For the record, he does have something typed out that I typed out for him, so it was bigger. It's easier for him to read, Your Honor.
No, she said she cannot tell them to.
He would, Your Honor, there was some confusion about whether or not he could get his second handcuff off. I was just clarifying, the court said she cannot tell the sheriff's office.
Does he have to keep on the
Yes. I was just clarifying, Your Honor. Thank you.
Before I address this court directly, I want to do something that I have never been able to do throughout this time, until now. I want to say I can't imagine the pain and agony that for the families that have lost their children and what they're experiencing and what they're going through. As a parent, our biggest fear is losing our child or our children. And to lose a child is unimaginable. My heart is really broken for everybody involved. I understand my words are not going to bring any comfort. I understand that they're not going to relieve any pain. And quite frankly, they probably just don't believe me. However, I really want the families of Madison Baldwin, Hannah St. Juliana, Tate Meyer, Mir, and Justin Schilling to know how truly sorry I am, and how devastated I was when I heard what happened to them. I have cried for you and the loss of your children more times than I can count. I know your pain and loss will never go away. Part of you will be missing forever. But please know that I am truly very sorry. I am sorry for your loss as a result of what my son did. I cannot express how much I wish that I had known what was going on with him or what was going to happen. Because I absolutely would have done a lot of things differently. Again, my heart pours out to every single one of you. It really does. Jim Matthews, I'm not gonna overdo a lot of things that were already said. But I know the full amount of pressure that you have on you and the responsibility that has been placed on you throughout this case. I have the utmost respect for you, and I'm simply going to ask that you sentence me in a fair and just way. I over my trial and heard the evidence that was presented against me. You know that what my son did, I was not aware of, or that he was planning it, or that he obtained access to the firearms in my house. There was absolutely no evidence that suggested that. As my attorneys told you, I've been on lockdown for 23 hours a day. I've not been able to speak to my son since November 30th, and I have not been able to speak with my wife since December 3rd. I know that I have experienced pales in compassion to what those families who have lost their children and countless other victims experience every day because of what my son did. But I want you to know I too grieve for everyone, as I have explained. For everyone that's been affected by what my son pled guilty to doing. And I'll continue to feel this pain for the rest of my life as well. If I could go back and change things, if I could go back and do things differently, and maybe none of us would be here today. So again, I ask Your Honor to impose a just and fair sentence based on the truth about what you heard during my trial. I'm asking the court to sentence me to time served and place me on probation for the maximum time allowed with the GPS tether for as long as the court deems necessary. I also want to address one last thing. And that's to what Tate Mears' dad said. It is time that we all know the truth. We have been prohibited from telling the whole truth. The whole truth has not been told. And I'm with you, Mr. Meir. I too want the truth. Because you have not had it. You have not had the truth at all. The truth has not been presented to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crumbley. Ms. Seeley, are you wanting to? Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Seeley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I did submit a sentencing memorandum, Your Honor. I'm not going to belabor the points that I made in my memorandum, as I do believe that it was thorough. However, I do want to note for the court that, especially in statements that have been made about James, that he lacks remorse, that he doesn't feel bad, that he's trying to put off responsibility on everyone but himself, that he's allegedly made threats toward the elected prosecutor. Your Honor, in some of the same calls that the prosecution has tried to use and has quoted in their own sentencing memorandum and attached as exhibits to their memorandum, as I noted in my sentencing memorandum, Your Honor, James also said in those very same calls that he wished that he had known what his son was capable of. That if he had known, if he had been made aware of these things, if he had known that his son had obtained access to a firearm, that maybe he could have saved the 4 children's lives. That maybe he could have saved a lot more than that. Your Honor, there has never been a time that James Crumbley has not acknowledged what happened in this case. He has felt horrific grief for not only the families, but for the people who have been affected. He's grieved for himself, for his own child. And while that may not be something that is a popular statement to make, he's grieved for the child that he believed he had. Not the child who pled guilty, but the child that he believed he had on the morning of November 30th when he dropped his son off at school. James could not have predicted what his son was going to do that day. He couldn't have predicted because he didn't know that it was going to happen. As James said, Your Honor, you sat through the trial, Judge. You heard the evidence that was presented. You also know that there was no indication given in the evidence presented that James had knowledge of what his son was planning. That James didn't know that his son had been accessing that firearm unsupervised, or that he had access to the firearm unsupervised. Judge, you heard that that firearm was stored legally at the laws at the time, in November of 2021. That there may be differing opinions on whether or not that firearm was stored responsibly, Your Honor, but it was stored legally. It was stored unloaded. It was stored with the ammunition stored separately. Your Honor, James Crumbley did and made the decisions that he thought were right. Based on the information that he had, even on the morning of November 30th at the school, you heard multiple times that James had no knowledge of what his son was intending to do later that day. That even the school officials, the people who were trained, they talked about the special training that they had during trial. Even those individuals said that they did not believe that James's son was a threat to other people. That they had concerns about his sadness, Your Honor.
they had at a minimum concerns about his danger to himself, right?
Correct, Your Honor. Danger to himself due to his level of sadness, that they wanted him to go talk with somebody, but that it wasn't so emergent that he needed to be removed immediately.
And isn't it the reason they didn't want him to go home?
Your Honor, there's some dispute as to whether or not the testimony from the school is accurate as to what actually occurred in that office. And Judge, I don't want to try and retry the case. I don't think it serves anyone or benefits anyone. But I do want this court to be aware, and Your Honor, you observed James during the trial. You're aware that he had difficulties throughout the trial. He showed emotion. He struggled with some of the things that he heard and saw. And
I don't know how anyone could.
I agree, Your Honor. I agree. And as I've acknowledged numerous times throughout this case and throughout the trial, it is an incredibly emotional trial. Today is incredibly emotional for everyone involved. I echo what Ms. Smith said, there are no winners here. Everyone has lost in this case.
I think that Ms. Smith said her sentencing memo, that's possible to stand for everyone here, not just the victims, but the families as well. It is possible to stand for everyone.
And I agree with that, Your Honor. I did ask the court to sentence James to time served. I am going to echo his request for a period of supervision with a GPS tether. I understand that the court, we did object to some scoring. I understand that, again, the court has significantly strong pressure. The emotions run high in this case, Your Honor. I don't envy what you have to do. However, I am asking that you consider my request. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Senator.
I just have to correct some facts. The allegations that Jennifer and James Crumbley were left in the dark just are not true, and the evidence at trial does not show that. The evidence presented at trial that as late back as March, the 9th, 17th, and the 20th text messages about from your son to Jennifer Crumbley, that he was seeing things. In April, his text messages to his friends indicate he asked for help. His mother laughed at him. April 20th, Jennifer told his friend's mother that he was depressed. There were multiple visits to the gun range. There was 2 guns purchased for him. The Crumbleys were aware that he was struggling in school, and that they had a rather, I would say, critical fight the night before, which is all detailed, incidentally, and as well as where the gun actually was in the shooter's statements, his plea, and then multiple statements he made to the psychiatrist, the very same things. They stand here and say, oh, if only we could have called them. Well, calling those individuals would have resulted in all of the claims that's inconsistent with what he said, and it's inconsistent with what the psychiatrist testified to in the Miller hearing. So I had no intention of addressing this, but it was brought up, so I feel as if I have to, and I have a duty to do so.
Oh my gosh, I've been talking and I
They were
didn't.
concerned. The evidence showed that. They were very concerned. They were concerned about the drawing. And they were concerned based on the fact that they were called to school. Jennifer Crumbley's own statements acknowledges she was called to the school. They wanted him to get help. She said she had to go back to work, but they said that he could stay. None of that, by the way, is in dispute, and that she left. This insinuation that if only I had known he was sleeping in class and teachers might have been concerned, that none of this would have happened, is at the core of why you saw 6 people standing here and saying there's no remorse or accountability. And I want to be clear, remorse does not sound like I feel really bad. I'm sure they do. I don't dispute they feel bad. I don't dispute they have grief.
I'm sorry, y'all. I thought my mic was on and it was off because I could hear me. Forgive me, guys.
What that looks like
I'm
is
still learning.
we messed up. We should have done this and we didn't, and we are very sorry. And that has not happened, which is what we're talking about here, and what you heard the victim say. I I don't want to belabor any more than we had to in the trial. I have a deep respect for Ms. Lehman, but the facts of this and the elements of this case simply are not that the prosecution had to show that he had actual knowledge and he could predict and he knew exactly what his son was going to do. Those are not the elements of the crime. It's not what the jury was required to find, and it has nothing to do with their actual conviction.
I believe he's more remorseful than the wife. Like I said earlier, the sentencing is going to be 15 years max per child. That's 4. It can be served congruently or consecutively.
Because somebody thought they were bad or good parents.
But I believe he's more remorseful
Those two
than 2
trials
years by far.
involved multiple motions and objections over evidence that the court sustained. We did not allow the jury to present the information about Jennifer Crumbley that her lawyer made a strategic decision to, in the middle of the trial, say, open the door, you can bring it all in, was not due to the prosecution's requests or actions. But you can't seek to exclude evidence and then allow somebody to testify to an inconsistent with the evidence.
I don't like her attorney. She whiny.
The last thing I want to say is,
sorry, I'm being dramatic, but
there
it's
is
true.
case law that the court's aware of about what the court can consider in fashioning a proportional sentence. And we don't give power or authority to victims to decide or render verdicts.
Yep.
With good reason. But we should not, and we cannot, sanitize their pain or the weight of the impact or chalk it up to it's emotionally charged. As if everything that's happened here is because people sitting here are too emotional and they pressure people. Because that just simply isn't true. And not only should you consider the weight and the impact of the defendant's actions and inactions, you are required to, pursuant to the case law. It is one of the factors to consider, the severity and the impact of the crime. We've heard a lot about it's not what happened in the school. And while I understand that the negligence, the gross negligence that occurred happened before what happened in that day when he left that bathroom and started firing the 9mm and killing 4 kids. I understand that. But it is absolutely about what James and Jennifer did and what they didn't do and the gross negligence that caused those acts. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like. When 2 parents have the ability and are in the best position and have the most knowledge and need to protect other kids, and they do nothing. This is what it looks like. They do nothing, and then they come here today, and they claim they're victims of the school, of the prosecution, of the emotional tensions of public opinion. But there were 2 long and rigorous and detailed trials that included multiple victims and witnesses who testified under oath with hundreds of exhibits presented to the juries with the safeguard of this court allowing what they could see and what they couldn't see, and they were defended by 2 attorneys aptly and vigorously. That is what this conviction is about. And when fashioning a sentence, it is absolutely critical that you listen and consider the impact of what that gross negligence cost. So we're asking you to exceed the guidelines, because I believe all the factors pursuant to the case law.
Oh, you want more than the minimum.
With the necessary consideration of the impact of these crimes justifies you to do. We're asking you, the people are asking you, Your Honor, to consider the devastating impact of their gross negligence that was foreseeable. Help me. Blood everywhere. The world is dead. All the while, a 9mm had just been purchased for him. and 50 rounds of ammunition. Both things can be true, Your Honor. You can fashion a proportionate sentence, but not ignore the unimaginable loss and the grief that these parents are enduring.
It's a no-win-win for everybody, y'all.
With Tate,
But the parents knew he had mental issues, and they did not take full responsibility for those issues.
thank you.
They can't sit there and say they didn't know he was disturbed.
I guess I would like to say briefly to the families, considering your immeasurable grief, it's completely understandable to hate everything associated with these proceedings. I spent both trials looking out at all the family members, and I wondered to myself,
Come on, camera person.
straight on Mr. St. Juliana whether or not he'll ever smile again. And that's very difficult. I'm very aware of my job in this situation, very aware of my job.
So y'all don't need to tell her.
Not be swayed by public opinion, by media, by any of those different things. I can't and will not pretend to understand the pain the families are experiencing, but I did sit through these trials with you. I saw what you saw. I heard what you heard. So I can and will offer my deepest and most sincere condolences for your unfathomable losses. It's as I just said, it's not my role, it's not the role of the court system to make an example of the defendants. However, it is a goal of sentencing to act as a deterrent. These charges are not jury edicts about gun ownership or keeping the gun in a private home. All of the jurors in both trials agreed that they understood that. Parenting is a complex job. Parenting practices around the world share the goals of ensuring health and safety, preparation for life as a productive adult, and a transmission of cultural values. Parents are not expected to be psychic. But these convictions are not about poor parenting. These convictions confirm repeated acts or lack of acts that could have halted an oncoming runaway train. About repeatedly ignoring things that would make a reasonable person feel the hair on the back of their neck stand up. Opportunity knocked over and over again, louder and louder, and it was ignored.
I like
No
that.
one answered. And these two people should have and sure didn't. Mr. Crumbley, it's clear to this court that because of you, there was unfettered access to a gun or guns, as well as ammunition in your home. You characterized yourself as a martyr and threatened the well-being of the prosecutor. Mrs. Crumbley, you glorify the use and possession of these weapons. Your attitude toward your son and his behaviors was dispassionate and apathetic. Your response to school staff after a 12-minute meeting was, "Are we done here?" During your trial, you announced that you wouldn't do anything different. I understand that might have been misinterpreted, but it did cut the victim's deep. Because of both of your actions and inaction, among many, many other things, the world is missing out on a top college university will miss out on Tate's star quality football skills. I met Raina, who's wise beyond her years, and she's told us that among many, many other things, community will be denied Hannah's kindness, creativity, and sense of humor. Among many, many other things, the world will miss is Madison's kind and loving soul and the light that reflected her beauty both inside and out. Although a hero in death because of his organ donations that helped so many, we will never know where Justin, an excellent student with vast skills and interests, described as a mentor and a leader, would have left his giant imprint. The impact statements given here and the written statements provided to the court describe the cataclysmic impact the deaths of these children have had on their children. With regard to each defendant, this court has spent night and day thinking about this case, as you can imagine.
I wouldn't want to be her.
I've thought about this case, and I've considered the possibility for rehabilitation, the need to protect society, the penalty appropriate to the conduct and goal of deterring others from similar conduct. I have reviewed the pre-sentence investigation reports. I am, of course, sadly familiar with the facts and circumstances of these cases, as well as those surrounding each defendant. The advisory sentencing guidelines in this matter do not capture the catastrophic impact of the acts or the actions in these matters. The guidelines do not take into account complete lack of insight both defendants have for their behavior to this very day. The guidelines do not account for the severity of the circumstances in this matter. The guidelines ignore the survivors, including shooting victims, Phoebe Arthur, Elijah Mueller, Riley Farnes, Kylie Osage, John Shudo, Molly Darnell, and Aiden Watson. They were deeply wounded, both physically and emotionally. In addition to the seven wounded, each of the defendants' gross negligence has caused unimaginable suffering to hundreds of others as a result of what happened that day. Each act or inaction created a ripple effect. Therefore, an out-of-guideline sentence is appropriate and proportional.
Oh,
The court uses
snap.
the useful tool of legislative guidelines which embody the principles of proportionality, while also taking into account the nature of the offense and the background of each
She's going to
defendant.
throw the gavel at him.
I believe that the following sentences would be in the best interest of justice and are reasonable and proportionate to the seriousness of the matter and the circumstances surrounding each defendant. With regard to Jennifer Crumbley, it is the sense of this court, Ms. Crumbley, that you serve 10 to 15 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections. You will have credit for 858 days. State costs are $272. The crime victims' rights fee of $130. You and your agents may not have any contact with the families of Madison Baldwin, Tate Meir, Hannah St. Juliana, and Justin Schilling.
I thought she was going to give him more.
I will issue another ruling with regard to contact with your son, the shooter.
Oh, I gotta go back because
James Crumbley, it is an out-of-guideline, negligent act.
I gotta go back. I missed
The court
it.
uses the useful tool, while also taking into account the seriousness of the man Crumbley, that you serve 10 to 15 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections. You will have credit for 858 days. State costs are $272. The crime victims' rights fee of $130. You and your agents may not have any contact with the families of Madison Baldwin, Tate Meir, Hannah St. Juliana,
Could I ask
and Justin
consecutive or
Schilling.
congruent?
I will issue another ruling with regard to contact with your son, the shooter. Excuse me. As to defendant James Crumbley, it is the sense of this court that you serve 10 to 15 years with the Michigan Department of Corrections, that you receive credit for 858 days, that you pay state costs in the matter of $272, that there is a crime victims' rights fee of $130, that you or your agents had no contact with the families of Madison Baldwin, Tate Meir, Hannah St. Juliana, and Justin Schilling. Ms. Wheeler, I left anything now with regard to sentencing. No restitution has been requested by any of the families at this time, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. I would like to advise both defendants that you are entitled to appellate review of your conviction and sentence, including with the sentence exceeds the guideline range. This is done by filing a claim of appeal by right, or when you are not entitled to file a claim of appeal by right, an application for leave to appeal. If you cannot afford to hire an attorney to represent you on appeal, and request an attorney may be appointed for you. You may request an attorney by completing the request for
I think they're signing their appellate right there, y'all.
provided for you, and by returning the form to this court. or to the Michigan Assigned Counsel System.
Yeah, they're
at
already
the
signing
address
their
on the
appellate, I
form.
believe, or they're
If you
signing
wish
the
to preserve
verdict.
your automatic right to appeal, the form must be received within 42 days after sentencing. If you do not submit the form within 42 days from today, you may still file an application for leave to appeal if the form is received within 6 months after sentencing. Do each of the defendants acknowledge receipt of their appellate rights?
James acknowledges receipt, Your Honor. He's completing the form as we speak.
Your Honor, my plan is as well. Would the court like the forms here, or would you prefer us to?
It doesn't matter either way. Either way.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask that everyone remain seated while the defendants are taken out of the courtroom. I think they're going to finish their appointments.
They are going to, Mr. Crumbley is going to finish his form, Your Honor.
We'll wait for that.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, y'all, so that's kind of where we are. They got 10 to 15 years, but is that per count? She didn't say consecutive or congruent. So I'll have to wait until I actually read the actual verdict statement. But there were 4 counts, and so they could get up to 15 years per count. I don't know, like I said, she didn't make that clear. Now, the judge has been ill. She's recovering from COVID, I believe. She said she was contagious, and her doctor has deemed her no longer contagious, but she's still coughing and a little under the weather. So, James Crumbley, the father of Ethan Crumbley, the shooter of the Oxford High School shooting, got 10 to 15 years in prison. Credit for 858 days. That's, I think, 2 years, 8 months, and some change. And to pay roughly $400 in fees. So was Jennifer Crumbley. She got 10 to 15. Same 858 days credit, and the same in the fees. So they got identical sentences. Now they are withholding the verdict of, and there they go, the courtroom. They are, the judge is waiting to decide on the motion concerning whether or not James or Jennifer Crumbley can communicate with the father or with their son Ethan. I have chosen not to say his name very much, but for those of you who don't know, he was a 15-year-old boy who the parents bought a Sig Sauer 9mm, and he took it to school just days after they bought it and shot and killed 4 people and wounded many others, I think 7 to 10 others, and then of course destroyed a lot of families. So the parents were brought up on involuntary manslaughter. This is the first set of parents who've ever been charged in a crime that their child has committed. Their son, who was 15 years old at the time, had mental issues. He begged for help. There was a lot of clues. Both parents stated today that they did not see or recognize any of those clues, that they wish they would have known. Both of them blamed the school for not notifying them that there was an issue. They blamed the school, stating, I'm going to cut this down so you don't have to see this. They were stating that the school, it was the responsibility to notify them of some of the issues that they were having. They did not agree that they were kept in the loop with their child. The day of the actual shooting, the parents did have to go to the school because their son had drawn a gun on his math homework and drew a picture of a deceased person with a bunch of blood and holes in them and said, "Too much blood. I can't stop. Help me." And the parents went to the counselor's office for a conference about this, and 12 minutes later walked out without their son. They were handed 3 pages of referrals for their son, and they said that they couldn't afford it and said that they would deal with it later. Unfortunately, they both went back to work, and shortly later that afternoon, the son went through with what he had planned in his journal. He had written multiple days ahead that this was going to happen. He even said that there was nothing that anyone can do to stop him now that his parents had bought him this 9mm Sig Sauer. Then they said that, then he also stated that little do a lot of people know this is their last night to be alive. So this was a very sick child. They knew he had issues and they ignored it. and they did not do what was appropriate. And instead, they decided he needed a hobby, and the hobby was shooting guns. Yeah. I will say, though, I felt that Mr. Crumbley took far more responsibility today than Mrs. Crumbley. I felt that, and every one of the victim impact statements, they mentioned that Miss Crumbley in trial said that when asked, would you change the thing, she said no. I believe today she backpedaled a little bit. I apologize. I had a short night last night. So she backpedaled a little bit and tried to say, I didn't understand the situation in which the question was being asked, ... Of course, I would change things. I think that was a little too late. Mr. Crumbley, during trial, was emotionally upset. You could tell he struggled. Miss Crumbley was emotionally upset as well when she saw some of the videos, so much so that her and the lawyer were crying out loud in court, which is a big no-no. Her attorney, to me, I'm sorry. I feel that was she. I don't feel she was that great of an attorney. But in the end, both parents were found guilty for involuntary manslaughter because they did not take the precautions needed to protect the community from their son. Would any parent in their right mind hand a 15-year-old, well, actually, he had a 22 Ruger, and that carries 2 bullets. And then he was given a 9mm 6 Sauer. He wrote in his journals he was very angry at his parents for disrupting his plan to kill the students because his dad wouldn't get him the 6 Sauer. Then his dad caved in. They went. He bought the gun. Now that was strong purchase because the father bought the gun in the father's name, knowing he was going to give it to his son the moment he walked out that door. The mother posted pictures on her Instagram with the weapon in her hand saying, look what we just gave our son for Christmas. And then the boy at midnight had posted pictures that he had had the gun. So it's a really sad situation. I feel for the families. I want to say that I felt the both families did an amazing job. All of the people who gave both families, all 4 families, that gave victim impact statements. This is the second time they've had to do this. They did it the first time 6 months ago when Ethan Crumbley, the shooter, was actually sentenced. And I feel that having to do it all over again 6 months later is just brutal. I pray and I believe that with God's help that these families will move forward and try to lead productive lives and now can put this behind them. That are not putting their child that they lost behind them, but all the proceedings in the news media and all of the stressors they've gone through. This has been brutal. They've had to go through 3 trials. So it's over. It's done. Everyone is sentenced. And other than the motion hearing whether or not Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley should have access to their son while they're in prison, I'm on the fence on it. These families have lost their children forever. And these parents are fighting for their rights as convicted felons, fighting for their rights to have access to their son who killed these people at the age of 15. I'm on the fence. Part of me would say, nope, while you're in prison, you don't have contact. But, I'm not the judge, and thank God I'm not. I don't want that responsibility. So with that, everybody, I'm going to let you go. I hope you all have a great night. I will be streaming tomorrow today's proceedings in the George Kelly trial. So y'all be blessed. Have an awesome night. And until tomorrow morning, good night.